Watch the block. Pull! Right, hit!
So we may be live free. Please remain standing for the invocation. Chapter what?
Our Father, we're gathered here to remember and honor those who laid down their lives for our freedom, remembering them always in our hearts and minds, knowing one day we will meet again and rejoice in it. In Christ's holy name, amen.
Thank you, Monty. I'm going to talk a little bit about, you may be seated. I'm going to talk a little bit today about the history of Memorial Day. Many of you might know it was originally called Decoration Day. Memorial Day was supposed to be a day of remembrance for those who have died for our nation's service. It is time for our nation to decorate the graves of the dead who have died in our nation's service with flowers. Major General John A. Logan declared that Decoration Day should be observed on May 30th. It is believed that this date was chosen because flowers would be in full bloom all over the country. Currently, many people visit cemeteries and memorials on Memorial Day, which is traditionally seen as the start of the summer season. It is now celebrated in almost every state on the last Monday in May. This was passed by Congress through the National Holiday Act of 1971 to ensure a 3-day weekend for federal holidays. It's traditional for everyone to fly the United States flag at half-mast from dawn until noon to honor those who died in the military service. Volunteers everywhere place an American flag on each grave in each of our national cemeteries. It is important to remember that Memorial Day is not about division, it's about reconciliation. It is about coming together to honor those who gave their all. To ensure a sacrifice of America's fallen heroes are never forgotten. In December of 2000, the U.S. Congress passed the President signed into law the National Moment of Remembrance Act PL 106579, creating a White House Commission on the National Moment of Remembrance. The commission charter is to encourage people of the United States to give something back to their country, which provides them so much freedom and opportunity by encouraging them and coordinating commemoration of the United States Memorial Day, the National Moment of Remembrance. The National Moment of Remembrance, all Americans to pause wherever they are at 3 p.m. local time on Memorial Day for a minute of silence to remember and honor those who've died in service of the nation. As the moment of remembrance, founder Kamala Lespade states, it is a way we can help put the memorial back in Memorial Day. Oftentimes, Memorial Day is confused with Veterans Day. In accordance with the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, here's why. Many people confuse Memorial Day and Veterans Day. You should note that Memorial Day is remembering and honor of military personnel who died in their service of the country, particularly those who died in battle as a result of wounds sustained in battle. In contrast, Veterans Day is a day set aside to thank and honor all those who served honorably in the military. In wartime, peacetime, Veterans Day is really intended to thank all living veterans for their service and acknowledgement to their contribution to national security. Are appreciated and underscore the fact that those who served, not only who died, have sacrificed their duties. Memorial Day has many different customs. General Orders Number 11 stated in the observance, no form of ceremony is prescribed, but it is also noted that over time, several customs and symbols have become associated with this holiday. Such as, I have said, it is customary on Memorial Day to fly the flag at half-mast until noon, then raise it to the top of the staff until sunset. Taps, the 24-note bugle call, is usually played at all military funerals and Memorial Day services. Taps originated in 1862 when General Dan Butterfield grew tired of lights out call that was sounded at the end of each day. According to the Washington Post, so together with the brigade bugler, Butterfield made some changes to the tune. Not long after the melody was used at the burial for the first time when a battery commander ordered it played in lieu of customary 3 rifle volleys over the grave, it was because battery was so close to enemy lines, the commander was worried that the shots of the customary 3 rifle volleys would spark renewal fighting. The World War I poem in Flounders Field by John McCree inspired the Memorial Day custom of wearing a red artificial poppies. In 1915, a Georgia teacher and volunteer war worker named Monya Michaels began to campaign to make the poppies a symbol of tribute to veterans for keeping the faith with all who died. For years and years now, the sale of poppy has continued to support the work done by the veterans of foreign war. And of course, in 2000, our Congress established National Monument of Remembrance, which asked Americans to pause for 1 minute at 3 p.m. as an act of national unity. This time was chosen because 3 p.m. is the time when most Americans are enjoying their freedom on the national holiday. From a story in the American Legion magazine, this is why Memorial Day is so important. We don't just honor those who participate in the most hellacious firefights. We honor more than 1 million men and women who have lost their lives defending America in wars from the Revolution to the current global war on terrorism. People like Marine Sergeant Mike William Stacy, who was on his 4th deployment to Afghanistan when he was killed by an IED blast while walking patrol in Helmand Province on January 23, 2012. Like many who go to war, Stacy left a letter behind to read, just in case something happened to him. My death did not change the world. It may be tough for you to justify its meaning at all, but there is a greater meaning of it. Perhaps I did not change the world, but I will be a child. There will be a child who lives because men left the security they enjoyed of their homes, country, to come to his, and this child will learn in the new schools that we have been built. He will walk the streets and not worried about whether or not his leader hitchmen are going to come and kidnap him. He will grow into a fine man who will pursue every opportunity in his heart could desire. He will have the gift of freedom, which I enjoy for so long. And my life buys the safety of this child, who will one day change this world. Then I know that it was worth all. Like all who have fallen fighting in the primes of their lives, Marine Sergeant William Stacy is now also forever young. He is to be remembered this Memorial Day for many to come by bestowing on all of us the gift of freedom. Thank you all for coming and celebrating the Memorial Day with us. Thank you each of you to have taken time out of your lives to volunteer to make this special day of remembrance. Thank you. Lieutenant Colonel Susan Gaddis Lee grew up in Northwest Oklahoma and entered the U.S. Air Force at the age of 39 as a registered nurse. While serving in a remote assignment at Ocean Air Force Base, she was selected by the Air Force to attend medical school in Bethesda, Maryland, and graduated with a master's degree as a family nurse practitioner in 2001. She has practiced as a family nurse practitioner in the Air Force since then, and also served 3 years as the family nurse practitioner consultant subject matter experts for the Air Force. Surgeon General. Lieutenant Colonel Lee and her husband moved to Derby, Kansas almost 2 years ago, and she now serves as a medical service flight commander at McConnell Air Force Base. They plan to retire here in another 2 years. Lieutenant Colonel Lee.
Thank you, Commander. It is an honor to be asked to speak at a service like this. Memorial Day is very special to me for many reasons, starting with, I come from a long line of military folks in my family. My great-great-great-grandfather fought for the Union in the Civil War. My grandfather, all of his brothers, and my grandmother's brothers all fought in World War I. My dad and his brother and 2 brother-in-laws and my husband's father all fought in World War II. I had an uncle that saw service in Korea. My oldest brother fought in Vietnam as a Marine, had 3 cousins also served in Vietnam. 2 other brothers, a niece, a brother-in-law, and my son-in-law have all served in the military. I had a nephew who served a year in Afghanistan. He made it home safely, thanks be to God. I cherish my heritage of my family, and I first wanted to come into, I thought, the Army when I was 12 years old, when that oldest brother was serving in Vietnam. That was the first time we had war right on TV, right in your living rooms. And it was horrifying to me, but I wanted to go and do what I could. Now, being 12 years old, you can't do much. But that's when I got the drive to be a military nurse. Things kind of changed over time in high school, and at 16, I met my husband, fell in love, and we got married when I was 17. And those dreams of nursing kind of went by the wayside. Life got in the way. We raised our family. He had a really good job, but it wasn't in a place where I could go to school. So that just kind of went by the wayside until at age 35, I had the opportunity to figure out, what do you really want to do? And I still wanted to be a nurse. And so at 35, I started college into a nursing program at Edmond, Oklahoma. And when I graduated, I had not even thought about military service because I was so old. But the recruiters come out to snap up all the young nurses, and I talked to one, and he said, because I didn't have a criminal record, and I had made very good grades in school, and I had very good health, that he could get a waiver, and he did. Now, this was not in wartime at that time. This was in 1994, and things were really pretty calm, but I got a waiver, so I came into the active duty Air Force at age 39. My husband's brother is who swore me into office at my commissioning ceremony. He's a retired colonel from the Army. So I have a long family heritage to live up to here. I haven't seen combat myself. I really wanted to go, but my number never came up. I was needed here at home, working, teaching, that kind of stuff. But I have seen firsthand what war does. My only deployment was to Bosnia, to a NATO base, and I set up a clinic from scratch for the American troops there, serving with NATO, and ended up taking care of the Brits and the Canadians as well. But that's my only deployment. But I saw firsthand combat makes people do things they never thought they could do, never thought they would do. It makes them be up 36 hours straight with no sleep. Makes them bond with each other. Builds relationships, camaraderie. The bonds that can never be broken. The people you serve with in combat become your sisters and brothers forever. But on the other hand, I've also seen firsthand what war does, what combat does. Before I came to Kansas, I worked at the Army Medical Center at Landstuhl in Germany. There's an Air Force squadron there, and I was one of the providers there. Now, my job wasn't to take care of all the casualties being flown in from Afghanistan and Iraq, but rather to take care of the staff and their families that took care of the soldiers coming in. Also took care of the Department of Defense teachers, contractors, those folks working in Europe. In taking care, though, of the staff, I came to realize right away that PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, is not limited to combat survivors. The staff in the operating room, on the wards, in the ICU, in the emergency room where these troops come in, these people see things every day that you cannot imagine. One time I had a girl come, she was 19 years old, and I have a grandson who was the same age at that time. And she came in to see me in the clinic. Her supervisor had sent her down. This was her first assignment out of her training. And she was an OR tech. And so they took her in for her first day on the job. And it was do a simple, what they call a wound washout. And so she thought, I got this. I've been trained, I know what to do. I can do this. But when they got in there and she saw the wounds, she backed up and passed out. She was 19 years old, and there is no way to prepare these kids for what they have to see and do. So even though they don't see combat, they still have the struggles. Different, yes, but they still have the struggles. Mortuary Affairs unit I took care of. And these were the 19, 20-year-old kids putting body parts back together in coffins to give these soldiers, these casualties, a final respectable ride home. And that can do something to these young kids. PTSD isn't just for combat. At that hospital, they had divided the staff into 3 manpower teams. When casualties were happening fast and furious over in Afghanistan, in Iraq before I got there, but then while I was there, it was more Afghanistan, they would fly the wounded to Ramstein, Germany, which is 8 miles from my hospital. And then they had ambulance buses they'd load them up in. They'd bring them by the busload up the mountain to Landstuhl. And so you knew when you were in your everyday clinic and you heard manpower team, they had 3 different names for them, but they call a manpower team or maybe 2 manpower teams. You knew there was busloads of folks coming. And their job was to unload them and take them to where they needed to go. Whether it was straight to ICU, to the ER for more triage, straight to the operating room in some cases. And again, it's just everyday folks, the dining room facility people, everybody was on a team. So we all had to help. And so you see things. And you see what these men and women paid for our freedom with when you see the wounds that they carried. One day I was walking down the hall. When the walking wounded came in there, you could see, you always knew, if you worked there, you always knew who they were because they had this yellow bag, kind of like a plastic grocery bag, but it was bright yellow. And it had a map of the hospital because it was huge. Schedules of things. It would have their schedule, which appointments they had, what time, already planned for them by the time they got there. But you always knew that was the new guy if they were walking around carrying a yellow sack. Because by day 2, they had ditched the sack. One day I saw, on the way to the dining room myself, and I saw a young Marine, and he was walking with crutches down the hall to get to the cafeteria, and he had his yellow bag with his crutch, struggling to get down there, and he had both feet bandaged up all the way up to his knees. Big old white puffy bandages. And so we'd always talk to him, and I said, welcome to Germany. Glad you made it here. And just kept conversation, try to make him at ease. And I said, it looks like you got your feet banged up a little bit. And he stopped where he was, and he looked at me in the face and said, ma'am, I'm just glad I still have 2 legs. And that's when it brought it home to me what our freedoms cost. You may not agree politically with what's happened in Iraq and in Afghanistan, or even in Vietnam, or even in Korea, or World War II, or I. But it's our responsibility to support those troops who go. They don't go because they voted for that decision. They go because they're sent, because they care about the country. They may not agree with everything political. It's not their fault. Just like in Vietnam, it wasn't those men and women's fault if people back home didn't agree with the politics. And it's time we take care of all these people. In the last century alone, hundreds of thousands of people have given ultimate sacrifice for us everyday people, to come out to a cemetery or to a park and celebrate holidays. Just in the last century, in World War I, there were 116,516 casualties, Americans. In World War II, 405,399. In Korea, 33,686. In Vietnam, 58,209. In the Gulf War, 294. In Iraq, 4,404. In Afghanistan, 1,086. But that number is still climbing because we still have folks who were injured there still dying from the wounds. And occasionally we do still have 1 or 2 lost in fighting even today. These numbers are astounding, but they don't even count the training accidents, the clandestine operations that you and I don't ever read about in the paper, but they're happening every day. And even humanitarian missions, when there's national disasters, drought, starvation, different things like that. Occasionally we lose service members in those situations too. What I want you to think about today, besides all these numbers, someone said recently, not everyone who died in war died in combat. Not everyone who came home ever left the war. Invisible wounds like PTSD and TBI, traumatic brain injury, have claimed more lives at home than in combat now. Every day, 22 vets commit suicide. Multiply that by 365 days. 8,000 per year. Look around you here at this cemetery. How many days till all of us would disappear at that rate? It wouldn't take long. My dad's dad actually died in the VA hospital right here in Wichita, Kansas. We were from Oklahoma, but that was the closest VA hospital for where they lived. He didn't die from actual combat injuries, per se. He died of lung disease and infections and chronic disease complications from the mustard gas that he was succumbed to in the trenches in France in World War I. I never met my granddad because he died long before my parents were even married. But that was a war casualty, and he died right here in a VA hospital. I think my most humbling experience for Memorial Day service, and one I wish all of you, especially you riders, could experience, is several times Larry and I have had the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. and participate in what they call the Rolling Thunder Ride. The Rolling Thunder, it's not really a rally. It initially started as a protest march to Washington, demanding a bunch of bikers getting together, riding on Washington, to demand an accountability for missing in action folks. The ones from all these wars that never came back. There's still folks missing from World War II that were never accounted for. There's still people from World War I that nobody ever knew exactly what happened to. Their bodies never came home. Vietnam, the numbers were astounding. We don't have so many from this most recent wars, but they're still out there. And Rolling Thunder now, when you go, there's 500,000 motorcycles. And they gather at the Pentagon parking lot. They clear the parking lot. They gather at the Pentagon parking lot. And they ride out in parade formation. And they close the streets around the whole mall in Washington, D.C. for these men and women riders to ride. And most of them have a flag on their bike, at least one, some more. As they ride around the entire mall, they end up at the Vietnam Memorial, because initially it was started demanding an accounting for the missing in action in Vietnam is how the whole ceremony started. But there's this one Marine that stands out there in the middle of the street every year, and he stands at a sharp salute as every bike goes by. And now it's up to 500,000 bikes, 500,000 plus, and he stands and salutes the flag as it goes by. And that's his way of indicating the support for the whole operation. I wish all of you could see that. It's amazing. My husband's best friend, Bill Strickland, he and Larry rode together, and his wife and I, and we'd do a lot of stuff together when I was stationed at Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma. Probably Larry's best friend. We had moved to South Carolina, had got orders, and we moved, went to South Carolina. Bill had never gone to see the Vietnam Memorial Wall. You see, Bill was a two-time vet he served 2 tours in Vietnam. Bill earned 2 Bronze Stars and 2 Purple Hearts, but I never did know why, because he would never talk about it, even to his wife. He was my hero, an amazing, amazing man. Gave his life for Shriners and for military service stuff, supporting the troops, Veterans Day things, Memorial Day things, that kind of stuff. In 2008, he and his wife rode out to South Carolina, and together the 4 of us went up to Washington, D.C., so he could ride in Rolling Thunder. He said it was time. He said later that my husband was the first person he knew in all those years that he could trust enough to go to the wall. Bill lost most of both of his units in Vietnam, and it took a lot for him to settle and be able to go and participate in that. But that's probably the most meaningful thing to me for any Memorial Day, was to see my hero finally be open enough to kind of let some things go, and it took that long, clear till 2008. The next year, unfortunately, he did die from cancer quite unexpectedly, but he got to go to the wall. So whatever, you veterans, whatever it takes for you to make peace with what's happened in your past, find it and hang on to it. This Memorial Day, I challenge each of you, veterans or not, families, friends, if you're just the guy that cleans up the cemetery and you're here waiting on us to leave, I challenge each of you, remember the fallen, above all today. Further, take care of each other, veterans and families, all ages, all war times. Make a difference to someone else, even in small ways. A smile here and there. Go down to the VA hospital and shake a few hands. Participate in things like sometimes the American Legion does banana runs and takes bananas and cookies and things to the folks in the hospital. Do small things, they add up. Vote every opportunity you get. Let your vote speak out. The VA hospital system is not in the shape it's in because of the nurses and doctors that work there. It's in the shape it's in because of your congressmen and senators. And the only way you're going to make change is to write to that congressman, write to your senators, find out who your representatives are, let them know this has got to stop. Let your feelings be known when you vote. I can't take sides, I can't name candidates in uniform. But pay attention to how your people are voting now as things are being discussed, so that election time, you'll be informed and you'll know what you want for your voice. As I said at first, you may not support the current politics, but please, please, never stop supporting the vets and the troops. They don't support the politics either a lot of the time. Choose to protect you. They choose to protect you and your freedoms. So I implore you to choose to protect them and take care of them. Take care of each other. And in the golden years, continue to take care of each other. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Next to it, it's supposed to show honor and respect for the fallen at the battle site. This practice started in the American Civil War as a means of identifying the bodies on the battleground before they were moved. Today it is an intimate means of showing respect for the fallen among the still living members of the troops. It might be seen in a field or base camp after a battle in Afghanistan or Iraq. Lieutenant Chang, will you please come forward and pay tribute to the fallen.